This meeting is being recorded.
Good morning, everybody. Let us wave to our friends on Zoom and to each other. Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Lynchburg. Here we gather in a spirit of freedom and friendship. Whoever you are, whatever your beliefs, whatever your age, and whomever you love, you're welcome here. As we work together for justice, compassion, and peace, we acknowledge with humility that we sit on Monacan Nation land. My name is not Gary Duvall. Unfortunately, Gary is feeling a little off today, so I'm substituting. I'm Betty Corbin, and I'm a member of the Board of Trustees. And I've been around this place not as long as Gary, because he's been around since he was a child for 51 years. And I've only been around for about 35 of those 51. If you are here for the first time today, we're glad you chose to be here. And you will find in the back of some of the chairs yellow cards that you can fill out so you can get on our mailing list, either electronic or paper copy. And we certainly would like to tell you more about our church community. Quite a few of us will be back in the coffee hour, and just ask anybody that looks like we've been around for a couple of years. There's also, for anyone on Zoom who's new, you can actually access information through uulynchburg.org, which is our website. You may want to join the Facebook group, and again, you'll know that the order of service is in the chat on the Zoom link to the right of your screen if you're using a PC, and if you're on your phone, it's at the bottom, and good luck reading it for anybody who has eyes over 40. Okay, so more seriously, we will enter our time of worship. And as we enter this, we will light the flame of our chalice, sharing these words. We light the chalice this morning for innocence, because we believe the seasons of Christmas, which Advent portends, is a season of innocence, a time when people suspend distrust and strive for peace, knowing what we must become innocent as children in order to seek peace.
Now for our call to worship, we have a responsive reading. It is innocence that is full and experience that is empty.
It is innocence that wins and experience that loses.
It is innocence that is young and experience that is old. It is innocence that is born and experience that dies.
It is innocence that knows and experience that does not know.
It is the child who is full and the adult who is empty. Empty as an empty gourd and as an empty barrel.
That is what I do with that experience of yours. Now then, children, go to school. And you adults, go to the school of life. Go and learn how to unlearn.
And now if we can all join together and stand in body or spirit to sing hymn number 225, O come, Emmanuel.
And this is the time for the children's story, so if the children will come forward to sit, I will come down to greet you. Thank you. And this is what I use here? Yep. All right. Good morning. My name is Annie. Actually, I don't think anyone introduced me to the rest of the congregation. I'm Annie Foerster. I was here last May, I think you might remember, and I brought friends with me, and at Joys and Concerns, she stood up and said, "It's Annie's birthday," and you all sang happy birthday to me. So So thank you for inviting me back. Okay, this story is called Shirley's Advent Calendar. How many of you have an Advent calendar this year? Do you? Have you started opening it yet? And does yours have just sayings in it, or is it the kind that has a piece of candy in it? It helps you wait for Christmas. You've got one too? Oh, I thought you had you're just waving your hand. Do you have an Advent calendar? You know what it is? Oh, a snowman one. And how about you, Zinnia? Do you have one? It's a calendar that lets you know that Christmas is coming in 4 more weeks from today. You do have one. Okay. I just wanted to know. You have a horsey one. Okay, well, this is a story about Shirley and her Advent calendar. And when she opened the first window, she sighed and she said, "Oh my goodness, it's 4 more weeks until Christmas. I can't wait." And she went to church with her parents that Sunday, and there was still a big box being made ready to collect presents and canned goods. She says, "Why are they doing that?" She and her mother said, "Because some people don't have enough money to buy gifts for their loved ones for Christmas, and they don't have food to share, and we do, so we want to share with them the spirit of Christmas." And Shirley said, "Oh, that's such a nice thing to do. It's what I love about Christmas." And all week she turned the windows in her Advent calendar and sighed, "Oh, I just can't wait for Christmas. The days seem to move so slowly." The next week after church, her older sister was in her room, taking things out of her closet and putting them on the bed. What's happening? Yeah, no, stop again. I don't know. Anyway, she said to her sister, "What are you doing?" And her sister said, "A girl in my school had a fire in her house, and all her clothes got burned up, or they smell of smoke. And I thought I'd give her some of mine because we're the same size. And she has a sister about your size. If you have any clothes you could spare for her." And Shirley said, "Oh, that's so nice. It's like an early Christmas for this poor family. I'll go look in my closet." And then again, all week, she turned the windows of her Advent calendar and sighed, "I just can't wait until Christmas, still 2 more weeks." But it was getting closer. And the next week after church, she and her family drove out to a tree farm and picked out their Christmas tree. And when they got home, they put it in the living room right in front of the big window. And Shirley said, "What has a tree got to do with Christmas?" And her father said, "What a good question. It's to remind us that when winter comes and all the flowers die, there's still life in the world." Can we have a little silence while we listen to the story? Because if you don't want to listen, you don't have to, but you can be quiet, okay? All right, deal. "The lights on the tree reflect the stars in the sky, and they promise longer days in spring to come." "I like that," said Shirley. "It's one of my favorite things about Christmas." And all week she turned the windows of her Advent calendar and sighed. What did she sigh? "I just can't wait until Christmas." Do you say that? Yeah, me too. Her sighs got louder as the day got closer, and the next week after church, her brother invited her to go out caroling with him and some of his friends. She knew the words to all the good Christmas songs, including Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, and she wrapped up in her warmest coat and had ever so much fun, knocking on doors, singing, being invited in for hot cocoa. "I love Christmas," she said, "and it's only a few more days." And Shirley said, "I just can't wait." I know, it's coming, it's getting close. For the remaining days, she turned the windows of her Advent calendar and sighed, I just can't wait. And then they had a Christmas Eve pageant at church, and she was one of the angels. And her grandmother said, you were the most beautiful angel I've ever seen. And she could barely sleep that night with excitement. And sure enough, Shirley was up at 6 o'clock asking everyone, is it Christmas yet? Is it really Christmas? And it really was. And the family had breakfast and opened their presents together. And later her best friend came over and they showed each other what they'd gotten for Christmas. And Shirley said, I love the Christmas season. I feel as if I've been celebrating Christmas all month. And I can't wait until next year. There's no Advent calendar for that, let me tell you. Yeah. Okay, I'm going to make a decision. In the order of service, it says there's another reading and before you kids leave, but I left that reading up there. So I'm going to say it's time for the children to go to their classes. Is there any ritual that you do before the? Oh, we sing them out. Okay, thank you for listening. I'd like to share with you one of the stories of Christmas. There are so many. St. Nicholas's Visit, The Christmas Carol, It's a Wonderful Life, Miracle on 34th Street, Frosty the Snowman. But this one is a much older story. In the days of King Herod of Judea, there lived a priest called Zechariah, and he had a wife, Elizabeth by name. And both were worthy in the sight of God and scrupulously observed all the commandments and observances of the Lord. But they were childless. Elizabeth was barren, and they were both getting on in years. Now, Zechariah was exercising his priestly office when it fell to him by lot, as the ritual custom was, to enter the Lord's sanctuary and burn incense there. And at the hour of incense, the whole congregation was outside, praying. Then there appeared to him alone, the angel of the Lord standing on the right of the altar of incense. The sight disturbed Zechariah, and he was overcome with fear. But the angel said to him, Zechariah, do not be afraid. Your prayer will be heard. Your wife Elizabeth is to bear you a son, and you must name him John, which means God is gracious. He will be your joy and delight, and many will rejoice at his birth, for he will be great in the sight of heaven. I could feel the tickle coming. Can somebody get me a glass of water? I'll try to go on. Professional problems. Zechariah said to the angel, how can I be sure of this? I'm an old man, and my wife is getting on in years. And the angel replied, I am Gabriel, who stands in God's presence, and I have been sent to you to bring you this good news. Listen, since you have not believed my words, which will come true at their appointed time, you will be silenced and have no power of speech until this has happened. Meanwhile, the people were waiting for Zechariah and were surprised that he stayed in the sanctuary so long. And when he came out, he could not speak to them. And they realized that he had received a vision in the sanctuary, but he could only make signs to them and remained mute. When his time of service came to an end, he returned home. And sometime later, his wife Elizabeth conceived, and for 5 months she kept to herself. The Lord has done this for me, she said, now that it has pleased him to take away the waiting. Thus ends the story of John the Baptist.
The ministries of our church are supported by the love, talents, and efforts of many volunteers and staff, as well as the monetary support of our members and friends. If you have found this church to be of value in your life, then I invite you to be generous, as our morning offering is freely given and gratefully received. If you are on Zoom, you can find instructions on how to contribute at the donate link under About Us at uulynchburg.org. Tradition to honor the whole of our lives, and so you're invited to share the joys, sorrows, and
Thank you, Emily. So now it is my pleasure to introduce, which we probably should have done it at the start of the service, but if you haven't already figured it out, we're kind of winging it this morning. Reverend Annie Foerster, who has spoken with us before, and I really enjoyed what she had to say then, so I'm very much looking forward to what she has to say today.
Thank you, Kim. Well, as you know, the title of my sermon is Rumpelstiltskin, the Advent story, and I don't know if you knew that's what it was, because I think probably you think you know that story, don't you? I'm going to tell it to you. His name was given partly in honor and partly in error, and neither impressed the other children. I can hear them now, his peers taunting him with his name in their high nasal voices, repeating over and over until it was both nonsense and ridicule. Wrinkled pants and skinny legs, wrinkled pants and skinny legs, they called. Rumpelstiltskin. He had been named for his great-great-grandfather, who had been a tall, tall man with a deep, deep voice. Rumbler, they had called him for his gravelly baritone, and Stiltshins for his long lower limbs. Rumbler, Stiltshins. In his language, it was an honor. But when the great-grandson emigrated and tried to translate the name into the new land's tongue, it became a curse for his son. That was the error. Rumpelstiltskin, wrinkled pants and skinny legs. Oh, the situation was not without irony. The boy who had been given this tall, burdensome name as his family heritage was born a dwarf. Skinny legs, they called him after the long legs of his ancestor, but his were short and stubby, and his voice was no rumble. Even into adulthood, he retained the lilt and pitch of a child. It was well that that part of the name hadn't survived translation. What must the sensitive child have suffered? For aren't all children sensitive? What must the sensitive child have endured for his name and for his maladies? It is a certain knowledge that he disdained his contemporaries. As a child, he was aloof, to say the least. I mean, who could blame him, right? As an adult, he was remote. He didn't need them, didn't need their taunts, didn't need their companionship. But there's more irony here. They needed him, did they but know it. You see, many of the desired physical aspects he lacked at his birth, but he arrived with a singular gift. His was the gift of realizing transformation. If something terrible existed, he could transform it into something acceptable. Illness he could change to good health, fear to bravery. Himself he could not transform, but any illness of the soul or psyche, any crisis of bad planning or braggadocio, these he could alter. He was clever, but because he was not liked or understood, cleverness looked like magic. And you know what that means. People feared him and envied him his gift, and they could not forgive him for his deformities. So he took himself and his aptitude into the forest. He answered only the most heartrending pleas for help, and he made it his habit to charge a painful price in recompense, I suppose, for his own pain. Now, the story you've heard about the tailor and his beautiful daughter, that one is true. The wedding records have been verified. The king of the day did indeed marry the commoner daughter of a suit maker, who was reputed to have been a braggart of the first degree. The people of the area insist to this day that he did indeed claim that his girl child could spin straw into gold, and the king believed it too, because he wanted to. Thus she was locked in a room full of dried stems, where she wept inconsolably, and the little man heard her and came. Now, there's no witness to magic. I don't know how that really works. Did he actually spin the straw and transform it into precious metal? Or did he perhaps, and this is my theory, pull up a large truck, sweep out the room, and sprinkle a few coins he already had in his possession? We'll never know, so why argue the point? What is more important is the real transformations that occurred after he dried the tears of the wailing daughter. What is more magical, more miraculous, more mysterious even than the creation of precious metal from baser elements are the changes that occurred after the king entered the chamber in the morning and found that his fodder had become funds. The young commoner was transformed into a queen. The child was transformed into a wife. The virgin was transformed into a mother. Oh, these things happen every day. I know what you're going to say, but they are great miracles if we could but acknowledge them. They do not happen easily. They are the result of fearful waiting and dread anticipation. Recall, if you have it in your memory, you're waiting for your wedding day, the nervousness, the concern that something would go wrong. And remember, if you have it in your storyline, the strong sanding of two souls rubbing one another raw and smooth until they are transformed from rough lovers into graceful mates. And imagine, if you do not already know, the growing anticipation of birth and the miracle of creation that converts one from careless individual to proud and protective parent. I mean, if these aren't miracles, what are? But I digress. It is the preacher's prerogative to do so, but our story is not done. There is yet the price to be paid. As I study on the life and philosophy of the little man with the big name, I am not surprised that he asked for the firstborn child. I mean, without a mate of his own, and where would he find one living alone in the woods? He must have had cravings for some kind of companionship, perhaps another who would not laugh at his length or his label, one that would appreciate his cleverness for what it was and not be afraid or envious. He asked the price, and the Queen Mother, who believed she had to, said she would pay it. She had not been brought up to fend for herself, and so once again, she fell back on pitiful crying. And once again, the dwarf's heart was softened, only a little. Or possibly he saw an opportunity for another transformation. Let her suffer, he might have thought. Let her wait. Let her work on it for herself. That may have been what he was thinking. Tell me my name, and you can keep the brat, he said, already steeling himself for the possible loss of the child. Within 3 days, if you can guess my name, which hasn't been spoken aloud for years, I will mark your account paid in full. But don't count on my service ever again if that's the case. Well, the first 2 days she sent out a messenger to seek someone who might have heard the dwarf's name spoken long ago. And while the servant was gone, she paced her chambers, waiting for his return, waiting to hear the report. She held her child and she wept, waiting as any mother weeps and waits for all the days of her child's life that she cannot control. But nothing happened. No name was discovered. On the 3rd day, she could wait no more. She took the search into her own hands. Strapping the baby into her shawl, she went down to the newspaper office and asked to see the birth announcements for the past 50 years. She wasn't helpless after all. Another transformation. She found the stories of his parents' shame, the stories of his being named valedictorian of his class, but not showing up for graduation, the stories of his transformations, obviously quite overtold in her opinion, and the stories of his eventual disappearance into the forest. And she discovered his name, Rumpelstiltskin. However, the name isn't the important part of the story. It's just his name, given partly in honor and partly in error. The name isn't always the thing. Sometimes it's just a plot device. This story, you see, is about transformation, how the helpless, hapless lass became strong and self-reliant for the sake of her baby, how the waiting and worrying transformed her into a do-something mama. The ending isn't the important part of the story either, but just to clear up any misunderstandings, Rumpelstiltskin did not stamp through the floor in anger when she told him his name. He just smiled his most ironic smile and threw up his hands as if to say, that's life. But the transformed Queen Mother didn't let it end there, for she had become more wise in her tribulations. She invited the little man to visit whenever he wished, and she saw to it that the child appreciated him, and she watched that appreciation blossom into affection and love over the years. She watched the child transformed into a self-sufficient adult she could be proud of, and she watched the dwarf transformed into the loving person that dwelled in his heart and would have been his natural destiny, but for the silly name and the little legs. So there you have it. That's the real story of Rumpelstiltskin. Not even an original story, albeit an important one. His name might have been Buddha or Jesus or Kuan Yin, or the name of any number of people who have been given the gift of transformation. You see, it is a teaching story, a bit of fact, a generosity of exaggeration, a spicing of fancy, a hint of magic, always good in a story. It's the same story as Shirley waiting for Christmas. It's the same story as Elizabeth waiting in her old age for a child. It's the story of a weary world waiting for a sign or a savior. It's the story of innocence versus experience. And it is, as I said, a story of transformation. No, it's not history. It's not sociology. It's not even psychology. Mostly it's a story about the human condition, the possibility of miracles, about the inevitability of waiting for what is good, for what is desired, for what is needed, and for what will eventually come as we wait. I've examined the story of Rumpelstiltskin as I had promised. So now I want to turn to other stories of the Advent season, the stories of births of one who was named John the Baptist and another who was called Jesus of Nazareth. You see, Zechariah and Elizabeth did not call upon the services of a dwarf. No, they wept in the privacy of their own home, and they prayed, as was the way they did things in those days. And they waited agonizingly as their biological clocks ticked away. Now, Elizabeth waited in that special embarrassment that was the lot of women in those days who did not bear children. And their prayers were heard in the soft heart of an angel named Gabriel, who was the agent of transformation there. And they paid the price of the gift with silence for Zechariah and with seclusion for Elizabeth. Mary and Joseph played the waiting game as well. What child is this and whose? Where will we go? Who will know us? What is to become of us? Will the king kill our child as promised, or will the heavens preserve him? All the questions that all of us have asked, they asked. What will happen next? What will our life be about? And there is no answer except in the waiting and in the loss of innocence and in the naming of the event we wait for. But the story, the teaching story of the birth of Jesus has even more import than this. See it for what it was, a new story in a day and time when the old stories were quite different. Barbara Rhodey, in her meditation manual titled In the Simple Morning Light, notes that, quote, "The remarkable thing about the Christmas story is the change it represents in human thought," unquote. It is a story not about the God of jealousy and anger, but about a God who needs a humble young woman and the long months of patient waiting and the human process of birth to bring divinity into the world. Imagine, Barbara writes, that after years of hearing story after story of men and women bowing abjectly before the might of kings and emperors, tsars, dictators, chieftains, and tyrants, you hear a story in which 3 kings kneel before a tiny child in praise of possibility. Possibility. Possibility is the zygote of transformation. It is the union of potential and of hope. It is the long confinement of dreaming the painful birth of change. It is innocence arriving out of experience. It is innocence that is born and experience that dies. I've told you the stories. Do you see now what this season is all about? Do you understand what comes with all this waiting and the stress of anticipation? Do you understand the symbolism of transforming straw into gold, of birthing babies in a pile of straw? I ask you not to be impatient with the old stories. They may seem trivial at times in their unchanging repetition year after year. They may seem tedious in their demands on our credulity. A virgin birth? Oh, who could believe it? Gold out of straw? Who could believe that? A first child in old age? Ah, who could believe it? Visits by dwarfs, by angels, gifts from kings, stars that beckons. Who can believe any of it? But I ask you, my friends, to believe it. Believe it in innocence, for innocence is full of what might be when experience is used up and empty. And believe it in anticipation when waiting is hard and you need something to hold on to. Believe it in laughter and in tears, for stories are the repositories of joys and sorrow, and all of them are true in some way, even the made-up ones. Believe in this season of Advent. In the waiting will be born your tomorrows and your transformations. Believe that you must pay a terrible price for such a gift. Pay with fear of unknowing. Pay with pain of letting go of the past. Pay with praise and with thanksgiving. Believe it and make reparation the only way you can, by living your life well. And while you wait, remember that this day is the day you waited for yesterday. This is the day that has come to you, newborn and innocent with possibility. Take this day and go to the school of life. Go and learn how to unlearn. Speak out the name of whatever angel blesses you. Shout out the name of the dwarf who mocks you. Name the fears and name your blessings. And wait for tomorrow with all your heart. Please share with me our second hymn, number 226, Standing as You're Willing and Able. Kim, if you want to say the words from down there, I'll extinguish them. Okay.
As our service draws to a close, we extinguish the flame of our chalice as we say these words together. We extinguish the flame, but not the light of truth, warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.
And our benediction today is from Dag Hammarskjöld, the first leader of the UN, I think I remember. I am being driven forward into an unknown land, he said. The pass grows steeper, the air colder and sharper. A wind from my unknown goal stirs the strings of expectation. Still the question, shall I ever get there? There where life resounds, a clear, pure note in the silence. So may it be in all our lives. Thank you.
Let's wave goodbye to one another until we see each other again. And for those of us here, there's food waiting for us in Drysdale Hall and coffee.
But don't let it snow until I get back to Waynesboro.
Oh, it won't. It's warm today.